Hey, I'm Dave Fisher. Welcome to the Life Is series. The goal of this series is for me to share with you some of the experiences that I've had in my life to help you answer the meaning of life for yourself, right? Kind of a bold claim here, but we'll kind of make some progress towards it. So first, a little bit about me, just kind of before we dive in. I am not like a speaker or a pastor. I'm a college professor. It's what I do. I like to help people learn things. I actually teach computer science, which is kind of fun. But I choose to say things because I'm a computer scientist and an engineer in a pretty like logical, like sequential, organized way. It's just kind of how I think. And so what I wanted to do is I kind of wanted to put together a collection of things from my experiences that have helped me kind of like understand more about what life is and put it on YouTube for other people to watch and listen to, right? A couple of disclaimers before we should get going. So I always kind of like to set expectations on what you should expect and what you should not expect from something you're about to watch. The first disclaimer is can't tell you the meaning of life. It's very much like a thing you have to work out yourself. I always like stories, so I'll tell a story. So I'm a dad. I've got 4 kids. They come to me with homework questions all the time, and so like I'm sure that I've been asked, it's like, hey dad, what's 7 times 8, right? And so you get asked questions, and you have to think about like, well, how am I going to answer? And so one way you might answer is you might just say it's 56, right? Which is correct, by the way. And if you do that, you know that they're going to write it down in their homework and they're not going to learn anything like at all, right? And you realize that even a simple question like this, you can't just tell them an answer. It's just not how it works. They've got to understand, their foundation, which is addition, and how addition relates to multiplication. And then they can use that knowledge, and then they can answer questions like this themselves, right? And if an example as trivial as a math problem needs to be something that you work out for yourself, you can see how much more like a meaning of life is. So it's not. I'm not going to answer it for you, right? I'm just going to tell you about things that have helped my life, and then you're going to try to work it out. Other disclaimers. It takes a long time to figure things out. So, I mean, I think that we live for many decades for a reason, because it takes a while to kind of get your head around something and then to kind of move in that direction and then keep moving in that direction. So don't expect like your life to be radically different by the end of this time. Just kind of expect to be taking steps in that direction. The other thing I'll warn you about is that it's not going to be entirely new. People love new. New. It's like all the crazy like super weight loss diet invented only 4 months ago, right? This field of thinking about what is the meaning of life has been asked throughout time, right? So, I mean, our written history goes back to like 3,300 BC. So 5,000 years in that time period where most people have at least hopefully asked themselves something about the question. Before that, who knows how many people have contemplated the meaning of life. And so hopefully in all that time with all those people, somebody's kind of like knocked on the truth, right? Somebody's got something going that is actually like accurate for the meaning of life. So nothing that I'm going to say is going to be totally new. All it is it's phrased in a way that makes sense to me. It's organized in a way that makes sense to me. It's based on my experiences of my life. And to be honest, like something totally new came out, like it's probably false, right? So that's a couple of my disclaimers. All right, so the goal is to understand life, get these questions answered. What's my motivation for putting together this series? Well, it's just based on things that I've read in the Bible, right? So Luke, this is from Luke 1:3. Luke was a doctor. He traveled in the first century with Paul. He went around preaching the good news is what they called it then. And I'll say that Luke, he had an effect on, like, he helped Paul as a doctor. He spread the word. But the thing that really impressed me most about Luke is that he had a study. He had a crazy desire to learn more about firsthand accounts and firsthand witnesses. He never met Jesus, but he was able to interview like his mother. He was able to interview the apostles. He was around a time where he had this fanatical study, and he was motivated to write up an orderly account. And so I don't claim to be anything like Luke, but I was motivated to try to write up an orderly account of things that make sense to me. Now, I will also say that I just lost like a whole bunch of people because I put up a Bible verse. And so people get all kinds of preconceived notions. They judge a book by its cover very quickly. I myself am guilty. But take a minute, listen to what I have to say, and maybe it'll be applicable to your life as well. So how are we going to make progress is really how are we going to move forwards? Well, the outline of this series is that it's a 5-part series. This part that you're currently watching is called Laying a Foundation. Even within this part, there's 3 videos. So there's this video, and then there's a second one, then there's a third video, and those are laying a foundation. And then after that, there's 4 more parts. So it's kind of a big series, to be honest. And what we're going to be doing in the main parts is we're going to be looking at what people call life metaphors. And so a life metaphor is, life is like a garden. There's lots of different plants and variety, or life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Now, these metaphors help you think about life from some perspective, and they help you kind of understand it better. Now, the ones that I gave are kind of trivial examples because I didn't want to get too deep too early. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a couple words. So life is a blank. Life is a blank. You can see the third one, life is and it must start with a vowel sound, and it's a longer word. And these life metaphors are actually more than metaphors to me. They're actually what life is to me. And I think viewing it from different perspectives is a good way to kind of like put meaning behind life. Before we jump into that, though, we've got to lay some foundations on what I see, some experience I've had, and why I see life the way that I see things, right? We also have to talk about the process some. So I'm a college professor. I've been here for 18 years or so. And so as a college professor, we study how people learn, right? We look at our students in our classes and we say, what helped them learn? Who learned the material the best? We have assessments for how well they learned it, things like that. And we've discovered that there's a lot of different types of learning, but really learning happens when you do something, right? So it's not when I do something, it's when you do something. And so we try to set up like homework assignments. There won't be too much homework, but a little bit. We try to set up like learning activities, and we're going to be doing some of those in this series. And so the process kind of works like this. You start off with the passive learning technologies. So you listen to things that I have to say. So that's this video, right? I try to make the slides engaging so you can look at the slides, and that helps engage your brain better. When you see things, it helps you like think them through. And then after that, you go from passive to active learning exercises. And the active learning exercises that we're doing is hands-on activities. So the way these work is I've decided just use paper, keep it simple. So below this video on YouTube, there's a link to some hands-on activity, and you have to actually like print these out. And so there's some follow along notes, and then there's some activities that you're going to do. But that's where like more deep learning happens. That's where you're thinking about things and you're kind of like processing the information, and you have to do them if you want to actually learn anything, right? And then the last step is to reflect on what you've learned. And that's where you actually like think it through and you decide it's like, oh, I do feel that way, right? And you respond to it. And then that's where an opportunity comes to make changes in your life if you think changes are necessary or appropriate. So that's kind of the process we're going through. This is nothing new. This is not like novel new information. I didn't make this up this afternoon. This is a quote, a much older quote that I've enjoyed. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I may remember. Involve me and I learn. So this version of it was said by a Confucian philosopher, so 2,000 plus years ago. There's been many variations of it. Ben Franklin has one. But the idea is, of course, simple, that if you just listen and look at something, you're going to forget, and maybe you might remember some of it. But if you involve someone, and that's where I'm trying to do the hands-on activities, that's where you learn. So that's my motivation for doing these hands-on activities. You'll also find that you get back out whatever you put into things. So on YouTube, I'll put the link to the hands-on activity just below the video. So you have to click on that and print them out. It'll take you away from YouTube, but that's okay. I also plan to make a website, learningthroughteaching.org. It's not up yet. I'm hoping to make like a website and an app. Maybe by the time you watch this video, those things will exist, but they don't exist at the time of this filming. And this concept of you put into things, or you get out of things what you put into them, is also not even remotely new. So a quote from the Bible, a farmer who plants only a few seeds will get only a few crops, but the farmer who plants a lot of seeds will get a lot of crops. So same concept. What you put into things is what you're going to get out of things. And they have a little bit deeper meaning from that in the Bible verse, but that's all I was wanting to get from it today. So my hope for you is that you take a step closer to understanding the meaning of life from wherever you're at, right? So everybody's at different places and how well they think they understand things. So no matter where you're at, hopefully you take a step in a positive direction. You listen to the things that I have to say. You'll actually find that everybody's got a story to tell. Everybody's got something that they could teach you, right? So you could learn from everybody. You have to take the time to process what they're saying. But I've got a story to tell, and I'd love for you to listen to mine. You have to participate in things. In order for you to learn, it's about what you do, and that's where the hands-on activities come in. It's always hard to get people to actually over that hurdle of actually printing things and doing them, but that is the goal. And then, of course, you need to reflect and respond. And so this is where you think about your life and you think about what you should be doing with the time that you've got here on Earth, right? And again, I'll put in the disclaimer that it does really take time. So that's the overview. That's the process. But we haven't actually started yet. So where do we start, right? I mean, that can be one of the hardest things. Where do we start? What kind of questions should we be asking? What should we be doing to learn more? Where do we start? So I think that a good place to start is to think of questions that are meaningful in this area. And I'm going to pick 3 questions that have been meaningful to me in my life. And so I've put them on this sheet of paper. So they're called the big questions. And what I want you to do is I want you to take a pen and a sheet of paper and fill out, just kind of like a notes page, fill out your big question sheet as we go through them. So the first big question is, are we random or were we created? And so you can, write every word, or you can kind of paraphrase. So I'm just going to put random or created in my box here. And then, of course, there's a couple ways out of random or created. There's the random way out of this box. And a person who makes this choice believes in the Big Bang Theory, obviously. They believe in evolution. And so it's the idea that the planet came together because of gravity. Stars come together because of gravity. They orbit and spin the way the universe works because of laws, largely based on gravity. And then within the Earth, organisms began to appear over time as different molecules came together. And they evolved over a very long period of time. I think 4.5 billion years is a number that's thrown out. And there's no guiding principles. It is purely physics. And then the evolution from the apes, and then we have man, and people get smarter and smarter and smarter. That's the random theory. Then there's the creationism approach. The creationism approach is based on the idea that there's some creator. We're not saying that it's like the father of Abraham, right? In the Bible yet. We're just deciding whether it's created or random. That's all the deeper we're going with this question. And so the creation approach, creationism, says that there's some being, some existence, some presence that is guiding things. It's also interesting. I use terms like the Big Bang and evolution. You could be a creationism and still believe in the Big Bang and evolution, and that's fine. There's not actually a conflict there. The idea of the Big Bang is that's how God did it, right? So there's I should say the creator, not God. That's how the creator did it. They existed before things, and then they brought into existence the physical realm via a Big Bang. They use many physics laws to do things, including evolution. Evolution, by the way, is really just a scientific fact that cells grow in the next generation through survival of the fittest. They actually change over time. You can actually prove it with chemistry. So the fact that evolution is a factor is not actually a delta between these two. The delta is whether it explains everything or not. And someone who believes in creationism believes that there is some creator that was there before the Big Bang, that started things off, that got the thing rolling. So you could come out as random. You could come out as created. You could also come out as undecided. So undecided, and all of these you can kind of see on this chart here. So if I start filling these in, you can see that all of these kind of have an undecided bubble. If you're a student, like a lot of my students, they'll see that and they'll fill in the undecided all the way down. That'll be fine. And so you've got to decide which one you believe in, right? Is kind of the idea. And then I can share with you some experiences that I've had in my life that helps me kind of come out of this flow chart as well. So this is not a shock. You can tell from my tone. I come out on the created path. And what I wanted to do in this talk is kind of talk about why I've made these choices in the flow chart. So why did I choose to come out the created bubble? When did I choose to do it? What experiences have I had in my life that led me to this? So to be perfectly honest, this is a question which is a great place to start, but it's not actually a question I personally have ever struggled with. I have never bought the random theory. I don't know when I made this choice. It was pretty young, but I see the world, and admittedly, I see a lot of things that man has made. But I think about the fact that matter sticks together. I think about the fact that I have a brain that I can think about how to build these things. And then I take what I know about science. So I'm a PhD, right? I know how entropy works. I know how gases in the universe work, and I just don't think it's statistically likely to be random. I just don't think it makes sense. A story that I heard. This was in the 7th grade. This was Mr. Tatum's story, and I think it was world geography. Kind of a weird story to hear like in schools. But he told a story about someone who wins the lottery. So you win the lottery. Woohoo! You're happy. Things are good. You get a lot of money. You do stuff. You buy things. Eventually you get bored. That's just kind of how life works, right? You decide, hey, I'm going to buy a whole bunch of lottery tickets. I'm going to play again. And you buy a bunch of lottery tickets. You buy who knows how many lottery tickets. And you play again and you win again. So you are a 2-time lottery winner. And you're like, woohoo, I'm special. All right. So I did something great. And you justify the second win because you bought so many tickets, right? So it wasn't really a big deal. Then you get bored and you play again and you win again. And I think that's kind of weird. And you play again, you win the 4th time, and you play again, you win the 5th time. And after you win the lottery, the 3rd time and the 4th time and the 5th time, you got to kind of start asking yourself, you got to say, am I that lucky, right? Am I randomly winning the lottery the 3rd and the 4th and the 5th time? Because I'm just buying one ticket at this point, and it doesn't matter because I just win. And you have to decide whether somebody's cheating. Could be somebody rigging the lottery or there's like cameras on you or something. So something else is going on, or whether it's random. And that's all there is to it. It's just random and you shouldn't worry about it, right? And so I pop out the created line. Now I am going to change this question. Oh, there's a quote first. There's a quote from Einstein that I think is cool. So Einstein said that there's only 2 ways to live your life. One is though nothing is a miracle. And then the other is though everything is a miracle. And the difference being nothing is a miracle means it was just random, it just happened. Or everything is a miracle because we're here from some created being's reason, right? And so I kind of enjoyed Einstein's quotes. By the way, I think Einstein did actually pick that nothing was a miracle in his life. He wasn't an atheist, but he was close, right? So it's just kind of an interesting thing to put into my talk, right? Now I'm going to change this question just a little bit because I'm going to give myself 3 questions, right? So I gotta cheat a little bit. I'm going to add a couple words to the end of this, and I'm going to make it read from "Are we random or created?" to "Are we random or created for a reason?" So these 3 little words I'm going to just kind of tack on here. So you gotta change your notes. Sorry, see if you can sneak in "for a reason." And then once you add "for a reason," there's still a couple ways out of this box. I took off the created one, but I left the random and the undecided because those are still kind of the same for this question. So you might decide that we were created, but not really for any reason. It's just somebody could, so they made us, and there's really no reason for it. Or the other way you could come out of the box is that we were created intentionally for a purpose. I always like stories, so I have to tell a story for this. So I was walking down a hallway here on campus with my son, and I was kind of talking about this lecture. I do this to my family all the time. They get this lecture over and over again. And I said, Bowen, this hallway was created. It was created by a man, right? And there's doors all up and down this hallway. And so I turned to him and I asked him, it's like, Bowen, do you think these doors were created for a purpose? Like, do you think they open up into rooms, or do you think that they just don't go anywhere? And he's young enough that he kind of thought about it for a little bit. It's like, wouldn't that be weird if the doors just didn't go anywhere? And he decided that these doors were probably created for a purpose, right? So the creator of these doors wasn't crazy, right? He put the door on the wall, not just so it would open to a wall, but so that it would open to a room, so that there's a purpose for things. And life is much more so. I think about my ability to think, right? Like, my ability to think is very complex. My ability to figure things out, my ability to move my hands, to manipulate things, my ability to interact with other people and communicate. Even scientific facts like the fact that air can transmit wireless signals for Wi-Fi. I think that that physical principle being present so that we could figure it out and we could do all these fun and interesting things. Like, there is so much design to life. I just don't think it makes sense at all for it to be for no purpose. So whenever you see design, whenever you see a plan, there's a reason for it, right? I mean, even if you think about like military strategies, there's a reason that they're doing that. And so I believe that we were created. I believe that we were created for a purpose. Now, this question alone doesn't answer the meaning of life or anything like that, but it should be a motivation, right? It should start you thinking about, what is the purpose, right? It should be a fuel fire, right? To get you going, to try to figure out who created us, why did they create us, what is the purpose, what am I supposed to be doing? But that's kind of where I go with big question number one. So where do you go? Where do you go from here? So now what? So in actually trying to answer this, you can go a lot of directions. So there's a bunch of next questions. There's a lot of religions. There's a lot of explanations. There's a lot of books you can read. There's a lot of internet sites you can go to. There's other YouTube videos you can watch. And I could ask all of those questions. But the goal of this video series is for me to tell you my experience on what life is, and to tell you the questions that have actually been useful for me. So I'm sure I've asked a bunch of questions that weren't useful. But the question that I find useful as big question number two is, who was Jesus? And so you can get your sheet of paper out and you can write, who was Jesus? So we'll start with just kind of like the Wikipedia entry on Jesus. So Jesus was born in 4 BC is the best they can reckon these days. I have no problem with that. Some people argue it's like 0 BC, right? I guess there's no 0. 1 BC or 180, I'm not sure which. He was born in presumably Bethlehem, but obviously the Palestine region. Born and raised in Nazareth, a carpenter's son. At 30 years old, he became a preacher, preached for 3 years in the area around Nazareth to Jerusalem. And then at roughly 33, which scientists can put pretty accurately to like, I think 32 to 34 AD, he was killed on a cross by the Romans, by Pontius Pilate. And so those are kind of the factual things about Jesus. And so the question is, who was Jesus, right? And in fact, Jesus asked this question of many people himself, right? So it's like, what about you? Who do you say I am? And like, if I got asked that, it'd be hard to like not pass out, but I'd try to answer as well. This was asked to Peter, and he gave his answer, right? So the who is Jesus? This diamond has many different ways out of it, of course. The first way that I should acknowledge is that people come out of this saying he didn't exist. The argument here is that the Bible is just fiction. Somebody wrote it. They wrote it many years after he passed. All of it is a novel. People are very creative. That is the answer to he didn't exist. Now, I will be honest, there's not a tremendous amount of archaeological evidence. Like, people always look at like stone tablets or steels for writings that were from the history to look into the facts about these people. There is definitively some archaeological evidence for Jesus, and there is enough evidence that historians don't believe this, right? So like, there's enough evidence that says that he was a person, right? So it's interesting. I saw a study once where as many as like 15 to 20% of people believe that Jesus didn't exist. And I think that that's, I don't know, really, really kind of interesting, because I think it's not necessarily based on fact. I don't mean to be like idea bullying here, but I think it's based on more what people want to believe, right? And so people don't want to think about it. They kind of want to put it out of their mind. And so they just say, hey, it didn't exist. That's a bunch of baloney. They don't look up any information, and that's the end of the story, right? So I think that people that fall into that camp, I think that is probably the most common argument, because there's a tremendous amount of evidence to the point where historians believe that he did exist. Now, after that, the question becomes harder. So I talked about Jesus' life, and I talked about how he was crucified. But of course, as hopefully everyone watching this video knows, the Christian faith is that he rose after 3 days. So he killed on a Friday, rose on a Sunday, and he lived again, right? In fact, if you look at his life, that is just one miracle of many things that he said and many things that he's done. And so if you start to look at the life of Jesus, starting with what he said, which I think is the least contested things. So he said some pretty bold things. So he said, I and the Father are one. Obviously, you can notice how Father is capitalized. Father in this context is referring to God, Yahweh, the Creator, right? And so if he says, I and the Father are one of the things Jesus said is that he said he was God. He said he was the guy, right? So with big question number one, I've chosen that there is a creator that created you for a purpose. And Jesus says, I'm the guy, right? So that's important. Said again in another way, very truly I tell you, before Abraham was born, I am. And so he existed before the world was created. He existed before the Big Bang. He calls himself I am, which is a reference, if you read like a lot of Old Testaments, to Yahweh, the great I am. So he's saying that he is God. The reason I wanted to put this up here first is that I think that a lot of people, when they say, who is Jesus, they really want to say that he was a good teacher. He shared a message of love. He shared ideas that would be good for you to live your life by, very much like Gandhi, right? Or other just good teachers. But I'll say that somebody that says that they're a God, you can't call him a good teacher, right? So you've got to decide one way or another. You could decide that he was a lunatic. Like that's a perfectly valid way out of this bubble, but I won't let you go out as good teacher, right? So the lunatic argument says he thought he was God. He believed it. He through and through thought, I am God. He was a man, but he convinced himself he was a Jew. He read the scriptures. And he said, you know what? I kind of think it's me, right? And he believed it. He preached that he was, because he was crazy. And he lived his life, and he got followers. And he died thinking he was, but he was crazy, right? And so I think that is definitely a way that people come out of this flowchart. And I like to say the argument as convincingly as I can to be fair, right? Because I don't want you to see what I choose. So obviously I choose something different, and think, oh, he hadn't considered the possibility that this guy was just crazy, right? I've definitely considered it, right? Another way that you can come out of this is that he was a liar. So Jesus was Jewish. He understood the scriptures, which we call the Old Testament, or Jewish people call the Jewish Bible. He read them. He knew the law of Moses. He knew all the facts. He knew that they were looking for a Messiah, right? And he, in this argument, he was a liar, and he decided to trick everybody, right? So he's a con man is kind of what we're saying here. He knew that that the Lord should have been born in Bethlehem, so he made up a story about how he was born in Bethlehem. He knew that the Messiah would be born of the house and line of David, and so he falsified some records in his genealogy, and he presented himself as the Lord, and then he became famous, right? So that was his goal, was to become famous. Now, I'll say that I've never prescribed to this particular argument because he did die on a cross, which was not a good thing, right? So I would think that somebody that was a liar would come up with a much better plan, because the people actually, like if you think about Palm Sunday, they wanted him to be like the conquering great king. Like they wanted another person who was like David, who was a fighter, who was the king. And I think that if he was a liar, he would have gone a very different direction with his fame than accepting crucifixion on a cross. And his life as a servant, I don't think that would make sense. I put that on there because I've read in other literature that they put it on there. But to be honest, I've never considered that something that a lot of people think. I think a lot of people go the lunatic path out. Some people go the didn't exist path out. Or there's the other way out, which is that he was who he said he was. He was the guy. He was the creator. Now, that is a harder step to take, right? That's the big question number one. I think I got a lot of people to come with me on that one. But big question number two is definitely a bigger question. So I would expect people to spend quite a bit of time in the undecided bubble. I think that's good. I think that's healthy. You should definitely spend some time in the undecided bubble. There's a passage in the Bible that talks about seed falling on rocky soil, and it shoots up quickly. Like it's just like boom, plant. But it doesn't have any roots. And when the time of testing comes, it withers, right? So no good. And what the goal is to think this through, to be the seed that's planted in good soil, to be rooted, to think about your choice, and then to be ready when the time of testing comes to stick with your guns. And so I've obviously picked Lord. And so what I wanted to share is why. What were my experiences? How did I choose to make that step? It feels like a pretty big step. And so when did I do it? How did I do it? Things like that. So again, I think I'm 45 now. I made this choice when I was, I think, 12. So it has been a while. But how did I do it? So I grew up in the church. So everybody's got a background. That was mine. And so to be honest, I started with the assumption that it was true, but it wasn't really mine at that time, right? So if you'd asked me when I was 8, it's like, do you believe that Jesus was Lord? I'd say, yeah, of course I do, because I heard it just the other day, right, in church. And so I assumed that it was true, but I didn't realize that I was still undecided at that time. So I'm not always aware of things. So I started with the assumption that it was true. And then I kind of went about proving it, right? Like thinking about things. This is not an uncommon strategy. It wasn't done deliberately by me, but so for the Sudoku players out there, you get in this situation all the time where it's like, it's either a 2 or a 5 here, and then that means that the opposite is here, and then these squares up here. And sometimes the fastest way in Sudoku to solve something is to make an assumption, right? I think the 2's right here. I'm going to put the 5 here, and then that's going to flush some other things out, right? And if you go with that path, you end up asking yourself a lot of questions, like you look at the Bible. Do I believe the creation story of Adam and Eve? Do I believe in Noah's story of a great flood that destroyed the earth? And there are so many questions that come up as you read the Bible, especially the Old Testament. And then there are questions that come up in terms of, I had someone die in my life, right? So my own father passed away, for example. Does that make sense? Does that make sense for there to be a God and let that happen? And so these questions, they get hard, right? People get bitter about things that have happened to them. There's a lot of hard things. So in answering the question, like, is this assumption that Jesus is the Lord valid? You have to narrow it down a little bit. So there's too many questions, right? There's too many questions to get them all answered. You have to start thinking about, what are the important questions? So what are the questions that are the deal breaker questions? So Do I believe that he died and raised again by the hand of God? Like that's an important one, right? So you gotta understand that one. You've got to understand the things he said. So should we live our lives as servants? Should we spread the good news? Should our goal be to help other people? These are the questions that matter. And I don't know what your list is, right? But you can get it, you can make it go from like 100,000 questions down to like more like a reasonable number of like 4 or 5. And if you get to the point where you can answer these questions to where you believe in God, you want Jesus to be in your heart, you believe that we are eternal, you believe that we are created in the image of God, you believe that we can communicate with God, you believe that you want and need Christ in your life, you can start to see that it makes a lot more sense than you might have first thought. And I'll say that if you've answered big question number 1, the way that I have, that we were created intentionally for a purpose, it's actually not that surprising that the Creator would help you have a way to understand the purpose. He's not forcing you down the only path, right? But there would be a way that we could understand it. So we were given this brain, we were given our ability to think. And I would think that he would communicate with us in some ways. And to be honest, it's not surprising at all. To me, that the Creator would choose to become human, right? And so then, if it's not surprising to me at all that it would happen, who was it? I look at the life of Jesus, I look at the things that he said, and I look at the things that I did. I look at the people that have responded to him, and it actually makes a lot of sense to me that Jesus was Lord. And I can't force you down that path. There's no way to do that. But I wanted to tell you about my experiences and why I have accepted that Jesus was the Lord. All right, so hopefully you've filled that out. You filled out your little chart, and you've thought about your decision. What I would really like you to do is to mark where you're currently at. And there's no reason to lie. Like, you're not even telling me, right? You're not turning it in. You're not going to get graded on this. There's no reason to lie. Just mark where you're at, right? So like you go through this circle and then just say where you're at right now. And if you're undecided, that is a-okay, right? There's nothing wrong with being undecided. But I will say that if you are undecided, how long have you been sitting in undecided? What are you doing about moving out of undecided? It's important that you make a choice on this. And so that's kind of what I want you to do. Because I do want to have some more active learning exercises. I do want to move on to have you do something, and then we'll cut off this video in a little bit. The first thing I'd like for you to do is take a minute to memorize a Bible verse, which is kind of a weird request for people that haven't picked Lord. But I think that if you're trying to move out of undecided, learning more is a good way to do it. And you can learn by reading. That's what people always think. You can learn by watching videos and things like that. But memorizing is actually a really good way to learn because it affects you at a deeper level when you memorize something. It's something you can refer to again later when you're reflecting and responding. And so we choose to have people memorize a lot of things. And the verse that I've chosen to start with is Romans 10:9. Pretty simple verse. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. This verse was written by Paul. Hard for me to know the years, but it was in the 1st century. It was a letter that he wrote to Rome, to the Romans, so it was to be read by the Romans. And Paul was an apostle. He also never met Jesus, but he spread the word of God. And so this is the quote that I want to memorize with you. There's a couple different ways to memorize things. Some people just look at it and they just get it, right? It's like super good. Other people kind of need a little bit of a process. And so the process that I go through is small steps. So it starts off with just fill in the blanks. So if you confess is the first blank here with your mouth. I also like hand gestures. So like whenever I say this with my kid, it's like if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, so you've made the choice, which maybe is not today, but maybe someday, that Jesus is Lord. So the answer to big question number 2, Jesus is Lord. And you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead. So fill in believe and then heart. and then write out, God raised him from the dead. I won't do it here because it'll take me just a minute to write. And then the last part is you'll be saved. So get to where you can say that first one in your head. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, believe in your heart, God raised him from the dead. And then the last part, you'll be saved. You can even also optionally throw on Romans 10:9 as well. Once you think you've got it, once you think you can say it in your head, fold the sheet of paper. And then write it. So everybody's slow to write things, but take a minute and just write it out. See if you've actually got it memorized, and it's a part of you now. And then the other real thing that's important on memorization is review. So when you're in the shower, when you're taking a drive, see if you can still say it. And it'll spark you to think about this again to where you can reflect and respond on it. So take a minute to do that. Pause the video if you need. And then once you think you've got it, then we'll move on to another activity. The other activity that we've got for you at the end of this series or this video is a hands-on pre-test. So college professor, sue me. We do assessments. We do little surveys. This one's a pre-test. So at the beginning of the series, what are your thoughts on some of these things? What's your level of confidence? Where do you fall on some of these big questions? There is a placeholder for big question number 3. We haven't gotten to big question 3. We'll do that one later. But I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on the things. Again, there's no reason to lie to yourself. It's just for you, right? Nobody's going to see it. So take it, fill it out. And the goal is by the time you get to the end of the series, you've answered not only the laying the foundation, but you've gone through these 4 like life is word choice parts. Where are you at then? And so it's just kind of a way for you to help reflect on yourself. So that's the end of the first video. So take that pretest, and then we're going to pick back up in video number 2 of part number 1, laying a foundation. One of our goals is to fill in the last of the big questions, big question number 3. And then our other real goal is to figure out those life metaphor words and to have you take some time and think about what life metaphor words really work for you. So loved having you join me. That was awesome. Look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye.